The history of Nazi breeding farms stands as a chilling reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink when it succumbs to the belief in the superiority of one group over others. These sinister establishments were conceived as integral components of Nazi Germany's fervent conviction that a single race, known as the Aryan race, possessed innate superiority above all others. In the following exploration, we will delve into the unsettling aspects of these breeding programs, their disconcerting origins, the methods employed to select individuals with specific desired traits, the heinous experiments and brutal treatments endured by countless victims, the enduring repercussions on those who survived, and the vital lessons we must extract from this dark chapter in history. Prepare yourself for a detailed account of the shocking events that transpired within Nazi breeding farms. Rationale behind building breeding farms. The Nazis had some really big and unrealistic ideas. They were super obsessed with the idea that a group called the Aryans were the best, and they believed that everyone else was not as good. They thought that certain things about how a person looked and their genes, like the stuff that gets passed down from parents to children, made them better or worse in society. They wanted to create a group of people that they thought were perfect, and they called this group the master race. They thought that by doing these breeding programs, where they tried to make certain traits more common, they could change their whole society to be the way they wanted it to be. Imagine if someone believed that only people with blue eyes and blonde hair were the best, and they tried to make everyone in the world have those traits. That's kind of what the Nazis were doing, but they were doing it on a much bigger and scarier scale. They believed that if they could make everyone in their country look and be a certain way, it would make their country the most powerful in the world. It's really important to understand how these crazy ideas led to really terrible things happening in history. The Lebensborn organization, which stands for Fount of Life in German, was established on December 12, 1935. Its main purpose was to address the declining birth rates in Germany and to promote the ideas of Nazi eugenics, which aimed to improve the genetic quality of the population. This organization was based in Munich and had two roles, one as an office within the Schutzstaffel, SS responsible for certain family welfare programs, and the other as a society for Nazi leaders. On September 13, 1936, Heinrich Himmler, a top SS leader, issued instructions to SS members about Lebensborn's functions. He explained that Lebensborn would help SS leaders select and adopt children who met certain racial and genetic criteria. This organization was under his direct supervision and was part of the SS's Race and Settlement Central Bureau. Lebensborn had several duties, including supporting families with many racially valuable children, taking care of pregnant women who were also racially valuable, looking after the children born in this program, and providing support to the mothers. Membership in Lebensborn grew to 8,000 by 1939, with about 3,500 of them being SS leaders. Initially, the Lebensborn office was part of the SS Race and Settlement main office until 1938, when it was directly overseen by Himmler as part of his personal staff. The leaders of Lebensborn were SS officers, including Max Zollmann and Dr. Gregor Ebner. Their roles were instrumental in carrying out the organization's activities. The Lebensborn program. Lebensborn, which means Fount of Life, was a group started by the SS in Nazi Germany. Their main goal was to increase the number of children born who fit the Nazis' idea of a perfect Aryan race. This idea was based on something called Nazi eugenics, which was all about trying to improve the genetics of the population. Heinrich Himmler, a top Nazi leader, set up Lebensborn. They provided support to mostly unmarried mothers and encouraged these women to have their babies secretly at maternity homes. Then, they helped find new families for these babies, making sure they went to parents who the Nazis considered racially pure and healthy. This often meant they went to families with SS members. The women who had the most Aryan children were given a special award called the Cross of Honor of the German Mother. It's important to note that the Nazis made abortion legal and even encouraged it for disabled or non-Germanic children, But if you were part of the racially pure group, they were very strict about not allowing abortion. Lebensborn started in Germany in 1935, but it expanded to other European countries occupied by the Nazis during World War II. This expansion included finding and adopting racially worthy orphans and taking care of children born to Aryan women who had relationships with SS members. At first, they didn't include children born to common soldiers and foreign women because they couldn't prove that both sides were racially pure. However, during the war, many children were taken from their parents and judged based on Aryan standards to see if they should be raised in lebensborn homes and cared for by German families. The selection process. In 1939, during World War II, the Nazis began taking children from foreign countries like Yugoslavia, Poland, Russia, Ukraine, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Estonia, Latvia, and Norway as part of their lebensborn program. They did this because they believed it was their duty to either bring these children into their own German society or destroy their bloodline. The Nazis would take these children in front of their parents, which was a horrifying experience for the families. Once taken, the children underwent tests and were divided into 3 groups. The first group included children the Nazis found desirable to be a part of the German population. The second group contained children who were considered acceptable. The third group, unfortunately, consisted of children the Nazis didn't want. These children were sent to concentration camps to work or were killed. If the children were between 2 and 6 years old and fell into the first 2 groups, they were placed with families in the program who would raise them as foster children. If they were between 6 and 12 years old, they were sent to German boarding schools. At these schools, the children were given new German names and were taught to be proud of being German. The Nazis also forced them to forget their real parents and any information about their family history. Those who resisted this process were punished and sometimes sent to concentration camps. Towards the end of the war, all the records of the children kidnapped for the program were destroyed, making it extremely difficult to know exactly how many children were taken. The Polish government believes that 10,000 children were kidnapped, and sadly, less than 15% of them were reunited with their biological parents. Some estimates suggest the number could be as high as 200,000, but a more reasonable estimate is around 20,000, according to some experts like Dirk Moses. When the Nazis chose people for their breeding programs, they were extremely picky, to say the least. They were completely fixated on the idea of racial purity and the Aryan ideal, which they thought was the best. It wasn't just about how people looked, it was about their entire genetic makeup. They examined candidates based on many things, like what they looked like, who their family was, and whether they believed in Nazi ideas. Nazi doctors were at the center of this process, and they used fake science to try to make their terrible actions seem reasonable. So that's a peek into the really awful things that happened on Nazi breeding farms. It's a scary reminder of how low people can go when they believe in messed up ideas. We need to make sure we learn from history so that we never let such terrible practices happen again. Stay tuned for more articles that shine a light on the dark parts of history with a bit of humor and some perspective. Implementation. At first, the Lebensborn program was set up to help the wives of SS officers. They had places like maternity homes where women could give birth or get assistance with family matters. This program also welcomed unmarried women who were pregnant or had already given birth, as long as both the woman and the baby's father were considered to be racially valuable, according to the Nazis' beliefs. Surprisingly, about 60% of the mothers in this program were not married. It gave these women a way to have their babies secretly, away from their homes, without facing social shame. If the mothers didn't want to keep their children, the program had orphanages and a service to help find new families for the kids. When dealing with non-SS members, both parents and children usually had to be checked by SS doctors before being allowed into the program. The first Lebensborn home, called Heim Hochland, opened in 1936 in a small village near Munich, Germany. The first one outside of Germany started in Norway in 1941. Many of these places were set up in houses and nursing homes that had been taken from Jewish owners. The leaders of the League of German Girls were told to find young women who could become good partners for SS officers and have children.
Even though Lebensborn had facilities in several countries the Nazis occupied, most of their work happened in Germany, Norway, and northeastern Europe, especially Poland. In Norway, their main job was to help children born to Norwegian women and German soldiers. In northeastern Europe, they not only provided services to SS members, but also moved children, mainly orphans, to families in Germany. Around 8,000 children were born in lebensborn homes in Germany, and between 8,000 and 12,000 in Norway. In other places, there were fewer births. In Norway, the Lebensborn organization arranged about 250 adoptions. In most cases, the mothers agreed to the adoption, but not all of them were told that their children would be sent to Germany for adoption. After the war, the Norwegian government managed to bring back only 170 of these children. Inhumane practices, forced sterilizations. Think about this. Having your basic right to have children taken away from you against your will. In Nazi breeding farms, this terrible thing happened to many men and women. They did something called forced sterilizations, which means they made people unable to have kids on purpose. It was one of the many really cruel things they did, all because of their crazy idea called eugenics. This not only robbed people of their choice to become parents, but also left them with deep emotional pain that lasted a long time. Twin experiments. Now, let's talk about Dr. Joseph Mengele, who had a terrible nickname, the Angel of Death. He did some really awful things in Nazi breeding farms, especially when it came to twins, many of whom were just kids. He did these terrible experiments on them, and they didn't agree to it. His experiments were beyond imagination. He messed with their genes, which are like the instructions that make our bodies work. He even took out their organs, like parts of their bodies, as if they were objects to study. Mengele was completely obsessed with studying twins, and he did these incredibly cruel things to them. This left the twins with lifelong physical and mental scars, which meant they had pain and trauma that lasted their whole lives. It's really important to remember these terrible events in history so that we don't let them happen again. Genetic manipulation. The Nazi government did some really disturbing experiments on how traits and genes get passed down from parents to children. They wanted to try to control and change human genetics. In these experiments, they did terrible things like making women have babies with men they thought were the right race, and they did it the other way around too. They believed they could create a so-called better Aryan race like this. But here's the really shocking part. They treated people like they were just objects to be used for their experiments. They completely ignored what was right and wrong, and they crossed all the lines when it came to how humans should be treated. These Nazi breeding farms became places where they did horrible experiments on people, and it went against everything we believe about treating each other with respect and dignity. It's important to remember these terrible events in history so that we never let something like this happen again. The impact on the victims. Trauma and stigma. The people who survived the Nazi breeding farms carry emotional scars that stay with them for a very long time, even after they were freed. The pain they went through, like losing the ability to have kids and being part of those awful experiments, leaves a deep mark on their mental well-being. What makes it even harder for them is that people sometimes treat them badly because of what they went through. This makes their suffering even worse. So it's really important for all of us to be there for these survivors, to understand what they went through, and to provide them with the support and care they need. Long-term health effects. The survivors of Nazi breeding farms still suffer from the physical harm caused by the terrible things that happened to them. Forcing people not to have kids can mess up their hormones, which are chemicals that control our bodies. This can lead to all sorts of health problems. Besides that, the experiments they were put through were really painful, and they didn't get good medical care. This has left them with health issues that last their whole lives. It's really important to understand and do something about these long-lasting health problems to help these survivors feel better. Intergenerational trauma. The terrible things that happened in Nazi breeding farms didn't just hurt the people who were there. It also affected their children and grandchildren. The pain and suffering their parents or grandparents went through can have a big impact on the mental and emotional health of the later generations. It's really important to recognize and understand this kind of long-lasting pain that gets passed down in families. By doing that, we can help the people who are still feeling the effects of what happened back then and make sure they get the support they need to heal. Legacy and lessons learned after World War II, part of the Lebensborn organization working in northeastern Europe, faced accusations of kidnapping children who were considered racially valuable. The idea was to place these children with German families. However, when the leaders of Lebensborn were put on trial, United States of America versus Ulrich Greifeld, et al., it was found that only 340 out of approximately 10,000 foreign-born children located in American-controlled Germany had been handled by Lebensborn. The accused were actually acquitted of kidnapping charges. The court did uncover evidence that there was a program to kidnap or forcibly move children in northeastern Europe, but it concluded that these actions were carried out by individuals who were not part of Lebensborn. The exact number of children moved by Lebensborn or other groups remains unknown because the SS members destroyed many records before the Allied forces arrived. Here's what the trial transcript said. The prosecution hasn't proven with certainty that Lebensborn and the defendants involved were part of the Nazi kidnapping program. While it's clear that many children were kidnapped by other groups and brought to Germany, only a small number of them were connected to Lebensborn. And even in those cases, it was rare for Lebensborn to take children who still had a living parent. Most of the children connected to Lebensborn were orphans of ethnic Germans. Based on the evidence, defendant Solman is found not guilty of the charges. As for how the children were treated, after Germany surrendered, there were reports in the press about these super babies having good health and weight. They spent a lot of time outdoors, got 2 baths a day, and everything around them was kept very clean. Nurses made sure the children ate everything they were given. Until the end of the war, mothers and children in maternity homes received good treatment, including food, even though others in the area were suffering from hunger. However, after the war, some local communities mistreated the women, beating them, cutting their hair, and driving them away. Many Lebensborn children were born to unmarried mothers, and after the war, they often faced exclusion from society. There were some false beliefs about the program, like the idea that it involved forced breeding. This misunderstanding came from a mix of Himmler's efforts to create a racially pure Greater Germany and Nazi ideology. It's important to note that access to Lebensborn was limited, following the Nazis' ideas about race, and it could be described as controlled selective breeding. Recent discoveries and testimonies from Lebensborn children and their parents have shown that some SS men did father children through Himmler's program. These rumors were widespread in Germany during the program's time. As we explore the dark history of Nazi breeding farms, it's important to remember and pay tribute to the people who went through terrible suffering. By keeping their stories alive, we make sure that what happened to them wasn't forgotten, and we learn from it. Their experiences show us how awful hatred and treating people like they're not even human can be. These terrible events remind us that the fight for human rights and treating everyone with respect is ongoing. We need to keep watch and speak up against unfairness and prejudice whenever we see it. By doing that, we help create a world where every person is treated kindly and with empathy. When we think about the awful things that happened in Nazi breeding farms, it's a chance for us to decide that we want a better future. We can use the past to make a world that celebrates differences, protects people's rights, and treats every person as valuable. It's when we all work together that we can make a brighter future that includes everyone. To wrap it up, the horrifying events in Nazi breeding farms remind us of how cruel people can be and how dangerous extreme beliefs can be. We must always remember and honor the victims and make sure their stories are told. By learning from these past horrors, we can aim for a more caring and fair future, where every person's rights and dignity are respected. Let's never forget what happened in Nazi breeding farms, and do all we can to stop such terrible things from happening again. Portrayal in pop culture. The second series of the BBC TV show World on Fire, airing in 2023, includes a storyline about a German girl named Marga, who becomes part of the Lebensborn program in Germany. In the British film The Divided Heart from 1954, the story is inspired by a true event involving a Slovenian child. His father was executed by the Nazis, and his mother was sent to Auschwitz concentration camp. The boy was taken to Germany and adopted by a German couple. Later in life, he reunites with his biological mother. A German author named Will Berhold wrote a novel called Lebensborn, Tatsachen Roman in 1958. While it's based on real events, it includes some fictional elements in its narrative about the organization. The Czech TV film Spring of Life, released in 2000, tells the story of a Sudeten German teenager who was recruited to become a mother in a Lebensborn program in Poland. The 1986 US television film Of Pure Blood explores these breeding facilities during the Third Reich and the discovery of them by Lee Remick's character, Alicia Browning, who herself was one of these children. In the TV series The Man in the High Castle, characters like Joe Blake and Nicole Dermer were Lebensborn children. A video game called My Child Lebensborn, which won a BAFTA Games Award in 2018 for Game Beyond Entertainment, allows players to experience the challenges and bullying faced by Lebensborn children after the war. The Canadian TV show X Company depicts a French Lebensborn home in its first season. In the novel and film Sophie's Choice, the character Sophie attempts unsuccessfully to place her son in the Lebensborn program. The movie Jojo Rabbit uses satire to mock eugenics efforts. It portrays a group of blonde children in the Deutsches Jungvolk organization and jokingly refers to them as clones. In the manga Elfen Lied, there's a program aimed at replacing the human race with a superhuman species called the Decloni. This program is referred to as the Lebensborn. Thanks for watching the video, and if you found it informative, please like and subscribe to Time Capsule for similar content. We look forward to sharing more knowledge with you in the future. Until then, take care.